Hallowed and hushed be the place of the dead. Step softly, bow head. Tonight I share the story of the mysterious lady who visited Harrodsburg, Kentucky one night and danced her life away. And Jen shares the story of the Greenbrier Ghost of West Virginia. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hometown Haunts Podcast. I'm your host, Kat Logo, and along with me on this exploration into the unknown are my friends Jen Kohler and Christina Wald. How is everyone doing? It's the post-Halloween blues.
Yeah, everything's been fine. Just lots of painting.
Lots of painting.
I
Jen,
know
how are you
I never
feeling?
say anything different. Always lots of painting.
I am feeling much better after getting COVID on Halloween. Yay.
Mm,
For the first time ever.
that's not a trick or a treat.
No, I was really hoping I would be the last person on earth to get it, but I wasn't. And then it was snowing on Halloween here,
That made me laugh so much. I'm sorry, everyone.
which hasn't happened in a very, very, very long
Not
time.
since
But
1993.
oh my God, I didn't even live here then.
Mhm.
But it was kind of fun.
And we didn't
Yeah.
get any
Yeah.
trick-or-treaters this year. I don't know if it was the
No?
weather. We got
Yeah.
we don't ever usually get that many. We're next to a very busy road, but
Yeah.
last year we had a lot for us. Like I think we had like 30 last year, and this year there were none.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We had
So
6. And they were all people
That's
that
it?
lived either on my street or the street next to me. And, but all the trick-or-treating happened in the town center in the valley
Okay.
because I live on a mountain.
Mhm.
This mountain has 2 active bear families on it.
Mm,
And, basically walking around with bags of food sounds like a terrible idea
yeah,
when
with
you
teeny
have
tiny
2
little
black bear
ones.
families.
Yeah, no.
So, basically people just walked around, and looked at people's decorations.
Mhm.
So, we had a screaming banshee, so I guarantee anybody who came into our yard was safe from bear attack because no one's approaching the banshee. And then we also had Big and Little Mac, and Little Mac
Mhm.
talks all the time.
Oh, cool.
So, we had a few people pass by and wave, but they didn't come up and trick or treat. We only had
Yeah.
6 official trick or treaters.
Oh,
I
that's
think
not
people are
bad.
doing it less.
Yeah,
You know,
there's a
I
lot more community trick or treating down in, like,
yes.
towns or trunk and treats.
yeah.
Was also really popular. There was one that we missed that was where you could take your kid and your dogs going
Mhm.
around in a barn. That was I'm sad we missed that one, but we needed a new water heater that day, so
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it
Oh,
just depends on the community.
yeah,
Like,
that's true.
my sister knows all of her neighbors, and it's like a huge social there was one house we stopped at that had a fire going. They're like, "Hey, you want a beer?"
Mhm.
No, but thank you. And my brother-in-law and his friend that
Yeah.
was with us, they just sat there, chatted, and had a beer.
Yeah.
You
Well, yeah,
know?
there's a lot of, like, neighborhood parties and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like, further down our street, sometimes a bunch of the parents do stuff like that, although I
Mhm.
didn't notice it this year. I mean, I was teaching, so I wasn't
Yeah.
here,
The
Right.
weather
but
was
I
really
think that
bad, though.
people just like, especially if it was as cold as it was that day, they just
Yeah.
don't
It
do
was
it.
also a Tuesday,
Yeah.
and it's
Mhm,
hard to get into Halloween spirit on a Tuesday.
Well, yeah,
mhm.
especially when you have to go to school the next day and kids have to do homework that night or
Yeah, so yeah,
Well,
it was fun. It was fun seeing how Halloween's done here. There were people that had bonfires out, like what you were describing, where they were drinking and then handing out
mhm.
candy.
Mhm.
My old neighborhood in Cincinnati, we did the same thing. We had a bonfire, and everyone on the street was basically around the bonfire.
Mhm.
And the kids that would trick or treat would just basically go to us and go around the fire like a trunk or treat, basically, getting all the
Mhm.
treats from all of
Oh,
us, and we
cool.
would just get
Instead of
yeah,
knocking
I
on
would make
Yeah.
doors and
a
stuff.
hot
Yeah, that's
spiced
smart.
apple cider, and, it was
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love Halloween. It
do
used to
Mhm.
be every day.
Some
Yeah.
neighborhoods still get. I mean, a lot of people go to different neighborhoods too. When my mom lived close to you, Jen, they would get
Mhm.
hundreds of trick or treaters where she was.
I would get a lot too, but
But we
you know
don't have a
that
sidewalk
story.
either. We
Yeah.
don't have a
Oh,
sidewalk, and
yeah.
we're on a busy road, and so people tend not. Sometimes people come up this far, but not that many.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my old neighborhood, I got tons. And, the kids were just the year I got egged, I'm like, okay, no more candy for you ever.
No.
And I lived there for 13 years. So,
Wow.
yeah. And the
Yeah.
new place, I'm not sure. I only know of like one child that lives in my building. And I'm not
Yeah.
sure if they trick or treated here or not. If they do, I would totally hand out a bunch of candy. But, since I go over to my sister's every year, that's just my
That
routine
makes
Yeah.
it
now.
easier.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
gave out Pokemon cards.
Oh,
Yes,
nice.
someone did too.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
That's
it's
fun.
just each set came with 3 cards, and we bought
Mm.
them in bulk from Costco, and they're all Halloween themed Pokemon.
Oh, okay.
So we were very popular with the
Yeah, I
6
bet.
kids that came by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Mhm.
And we're
it.
just like, "We have so many, just take a handful." So there was kids that, like, took 10.
Yeah.
And like, "Yeah, sure, take it.
Yeah.
Bye." So,
That's a good idea.
they don't
Yeah, I
expire, and,
have seen that a lot with,
mhm,
like, toys, like,
mhm,
cheap little toys for kids
mhm,
or, yeah, just stuff that's different than candy, which is kind
yeah,
of fun, but at the same time, you kinda want the candy.
yeah, it's
Depends on the kid, I guess.
yeah, it yeah, little dude has not actually had too much of the candy.
Mhm.
He liked the act of going and getting it, and
Mhm.
now he's just like, I don't
Yeah.
really want to eat it. I'm not really." We still have candy from last year that never was eaten.
Yeah,
So
my nephew and my nibbling Sam are the same. They're both the
mhm,
same. They don't eat it all. I'm like, "I eat it all, like, the first night." Like, "What is wrong with you children?"
yeah,
Good parenting, I guess.
yeah, it was very
Yeah.
different way of doing it from when we were all kids,
Yeah,
but
oh, man. Well, and I'm a sugar fiend. I'm like, I couldn't
Well,
get enough.
I think that kids aren't saturated in sugar as much as they used to be. I mean, I
mm,
Right.
grew up in the 80s when there were sugared cereals.
Same.
Now, my mom never
Mhm.
bought them, so I was always envious of the kids that got the
We
right,
really
got the
sweet
Aldi
stuff, but we
version.
didn't get them. Oh, did you?
We always had the Aldi version, and honestly,
yeah,
I'm a little mad that they don't still have it because that's what I remember and that's what I want.
yeah.
But they don't have them anymore.
I got
They've
the
gotten
DFS
fancy.
version,
Uh-huh.
Gordon Food
Yeah.
Services.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's like everything is slightly more stale and less flavorful than the
Mhm.
name brand
Mhm.
versions. But, yeah, there's a it was a little hot fudge sundae. This is not Halloween candy, but on that note, there's a little hot fudge sundae that came in an individual package that was extremely cheap vanilla ice cream and extremely cheap fudge on top, and it would come with a little wooden spoon. It actually
Oh, I
Yes.
was
remember
yeah.
those. Yeah.
We
Yeah,
used to get those as treats in school
yeah,
too.
and I haven't seen them in decades, so
They were dreadful, so
they were
I don't miss
terrible.
them. Yeah, I mean, I
Ugh.
remember a lot of that prepackaged stuff that was popular, and it was like, "Why do people eat this? This is
Do you
just
Yeah,
horrible."
remember the Squeeze-Its?
yes. Oh,
Yes.
man,
Uh-huh.
Squeeze-Its.
Squeeze-Its.
Can't you
Yeah,
still get those?
some of them, yeah.
I don't know.
I know I saw them about at least 5 years ago at a grocery store.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
So, a lot more variety now. There's a lot more
Mm.
juices for kids that have less sugar.
Mhm.
It's just
I think it's good they're raising kids without so much sugar anymore
yeah.
because
I
I
agree.
think it's ultimately been not good to
Yeah.
have so much sugar,
I
and
love
maybe
it
that's
though.
why, in some areas, Halloween might not be as popular, and the Pokemon
Mm.
cards are a great idea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then there's a lot of food allergies, which people are a lot more aware of now.
Mhm.
Oh, my
Yeah.
sister always has a separate bowl,
Yep.
an allergy and non-allergy one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, the teal pumpkins. So, all right. Well,
Yay,
shall we get
Halloween.
into the show? We got only 2 show announcements. They're no different from last week, which is I have a comic. It's up on Webtoon for free. It's called Spiritus Maximus Resurrected. It updates every Friday. Please read it. and tell me what you think. And then on March 2nd of 2024 is the second annual Frogman Festival in Loveland, Ohio, and you can find more information at frogmanfestival.org. So
Cool.
let's get
Yay.
into our episode. So my portion, I am bringing you tonight for the Midnight Society, I feel like. The Dancing Lady of Harrodsburg, Kentucky. So the sources for tonight on my part are medium.com, the city of Harrodsburg, the Harrodsburg Herald, and Fox 56 News and Weird Kentucky. So, sitting atop a mineral spring, the Graham Springs Hotel, later known as the Harrodsburg Springs Hotel in Harrodsburg, Kentucky, was once known as a mecca of Southern society. Believing that the mineral spring water that bubbled up from the earth contained healing properties, Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham opened the hotel in 1819. Ex- Existing records are a little foggy, but we kind of know a little bit about the hotel. What is known is that the hotel enjoyed its heyday between the 1830s and 1840s, where our story begins. Between May to October of every year, guests would visit the hotel in central Kentucky to partake in the waters, they say. This was not a hotel you would just visit for a few days or a weekend and then go home. This was one of those hotels where you would stay a few weeks or even months because you are partaking of the healing waters to heal whatever ailment you had. According to legend, one day, sometime in the 1840s, a young woman named Virginia Stafford checked into the hotel claiming to be the daughter of Judge Stafford in Louisville and that he would be arriving soon after her. Soon after checking in, she descended the hotel staircase to participate in the dance being held at the ballroom of the hotel that night. During the evening's dance, the lighting of the hall was dimmed to add to the ambiance while couples filled each other's dance cards. Virginia was said to be a very pretty young lady in her 20s who danced passionately for hours with many dance partners throughout the festivities. Men at the party remembered how she would remark that this was the happiest night of her life and how she never sat down or took a rest. At the end of the night, when the lights came back up, to her partner's horror, Virginia was found dead in his arms. Hotel staff searched her room looking for items to identify her relatives, but the only items she had with her were the suitcase and the clothes that she arrived in. Judge Strafford was contacted in Louisville, but said he didn't have a daughter named Virginia. It turned out the young lady had checked in using a false name. After a week of trying to identify the tragic woman, the staff laid her to rest on the hotel property in a stone coffin. By the early 1850s, a story of the dancing lady's ghost was already being spread by Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham himself around the town. It was said that the guests and the staff would see a phantom lady dancing around the spring house in her nearby grave. In 1853, the hotel was sold to the U.S. government to be used as a veterans hospital. 3 years after that, the main building burned down. Another fire tore through the hospital in 1864, and a final fire in the 1880s burned down what buildings had remained. The dancing lady's ghost was blamed for all these fires engulfing ultimately destroying the hotel's old buildings. In 1938, Joe Sewell from Tazewell, Tennessee, claimed that the dancing lady was his estranged wife, Molly Black Sewell. Tired of her philandering husband, Molly had left him and traveled to the hotel where she tragically died. However, this was proven to be false when letters from Molly were found to have used the Confederate stamps, meaning they were sent between 1861 to 1865 when the Confederate States of America existed, 20 years after the death of Virginia Stafford, and not to mention the property was no longer used as a hotel by the 1860s and had been converted to a hospital, with both the main building and the outbuildings being burned down by that time. However, if you search Find a Grave, her grave is still listed as Molly the Dancing Lady Black Sewell. The Dancing Lady's cases have interested amateur and professional sleuths for decades. Various researchers, two in particular, Todd Matthews, the program director of the Doe Network, and Dr. Lynn Smelster, Smel I'm sorry, Dr. Lynn. Dr. Lynn Smelzer have been working on the case. The Doe Network is an organization created to help the missing and unidentified people. Dr. Smelzer has found stories where the dancing lady did not arrive alone that fateful day, but her companion abandoned her after she collapsed. Another story said that a man asked to be alone with the dancing lady, but fled the scene after she was found dead. Unearthed rumors of Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham's nephew, Dr. Robert Graham, we're just going to call him Robert, was staying at the hotel at the same time as the dancing lady. Robert had come to visit his uncle's hotel to soak in the springs in an attempt to cure his alcoholism. Robert was a notorious alcoholic and a violent man prone to angry outbursts. Around the same time as the dancing lady was said to have died, Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham sent Robert on an all-expenses paid trip to New Orleans. Robert even found and married his wife, Mary Waterman, in New Orleans in 1845. His temper flared later on a trip to New York City, where he killed Colonel Charles Loring at the St. Nicholas Hotel on November 1st, 1854, by running him through with a sword. Although Robert was convicted of second-degree murder, he was later pardoned by the governor of New York. Before we get into the hauntings, and there are more than just seeing a mysterious woman in the park, there are a few theories as how she died. The first is that she was murdered, maybe by Robert or maybe by somebody else in attendance that night. There were also suspicions that the dancing lady died of cholera. In the 1840s, there were many epidemics, and this was a hotel for healing through the mineral springs there. Cholera is a deadly disease, and especially in the 19th century, before it was known that cholera was also a waterborne deadly disease. The property is now called Young's Community Park or Young's Park and still houses the grave of the dancing lady. It is labeled as unknown. Sightings of the ghostly dancing lady have persisted over 180 years. One account from the 1920s details how a woman was visiting the park and was approached by a young lady who asked, "Can you help me, please? You see, I was dancing at the Harrodsburg Springs and I've lost my way." Upon learning that the hotel had burnt down over 100 years earlier, the young woman started crying and then disappeared. Math was not the woman's strong point in this particular story because it had not burned down 100 years prior, but it makes for a great number. Other members of the public have also witnessed the spectral lady dancing by herself in the moonlight around the gravesite, much like she was witnessed to do in the 1850s. Because of the sightings of her spirit throughout the decades, the dancing lady has become an established haunt in town. In doing research for the dancing lady's case, Dr. Smelser visited the gravesite of Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham. While there, she heard a voice say it was a mistake, it wasn't supposed to happen, before she left this site. And as she left the site, she got a sharp pain in her neck, leading Dr. Smelser to suspect that the dancing lady's neck had been broken. In 2021, both Matthews and the Doe Network and Dr. Smelser have petitioned Monroe County, Kentucky, the local authorities to exhume the body of the dancing lady so DNA samples could be taken and a DNA genetic profile could be constructed. Matthews has stated in an interview, "She's a missing leaf on somebody's family tree." Perhaps this is why she continues to haunt the park. In her moonlight dances, remind visitors that her case remains unsolved. So that is the dancing lady of Harrodsburg, Kentucky. One of the oldest ghost stories apparently in Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of tragic.
She is the oldest case in the Doe Network as well.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the entire country?
Yeah, in the entire country.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It kind of reminds me of the fairy tale, The Red Shoes. Did you ever read it?
It is very much like that, yeah.
It's one of the most horrifying things to ever read to a kid.
Yes, it is.
I found it quite terrifying as a child. You would have loved it. It's about a young woman who, when she's getting her shoes to get First Communion, instead of getting the black shoes she's supposed to, she gets these really bright red dancing shoes. And so God punishes her by telling her whenever she wears them that she'll have to be forced to dance. And she still keeps wearing them. And the last straw is when an angel tells her that they will now grow to her feet and she will have to dance through thickets and thorns and get all cut up because she can't take her shoes off. So she goes to an executioner and he cuts her feet off and the little feet dance away. And every time she tries to go to church, the little feet dance up again. And so she's afraid to go to church. And at the end, she is forgiven and dies. And spoiler alert.
In the story that it don't dance is the moral of that.
It's a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale with a very strong sort of, I suppose, anti-pride is really what it is, because she's very proud. Yeah, she's supposed to be very beautiful, and because so it's sort of the opposite of many fairy tales with the beautiful people, where it's like she's not modest enough.
Yeah,
and so she suffers greatly.
Yeah, like, how dare you wear fashionable red shoes to church?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You should wear
harlot.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's more to the story where I think at first she gets adopted by some older woman who can't tell what kind of shoes she's buying because she can't see her.
Yeah,
you know, that's like that's not as interesting to the central part of the story, but
older abuse is bad.
Yeah,
but
I'm gonna have to read that now.
Yeah, you can probably read it online.
I mean, it sounds vaguely familiar. I'm sure I've heard of it in some sort of form of something or other.
Sort of a divine retribution thing.
Yeah.
So mean.
It is. I mean,
man.
But I mean, this sounds like it almost also could be, and I'm sure there's stories like this. Like this almost sounds like it could be one of those old EC comics.
Yeah. It's just an interesting story that has persisted since the 1850s. Now, of course, we don't know if she actually danced to death. It just makes for a great story. She could have just died in the hotel and they couldn't figure out who she was, so they put her in a grave. I also think that if she did indeed dance, and I'm surprised that no one has floated this particular thought by, that she had a stroke or a heart condition.
Oh.
And because I've had a friend die of an acute stroke, and it can hit you in your 20s. Or she had a heart condition. This is saying that the rest of the story is true. She could have overworked herself and had a heart attack at a very young age as well. Because these dances, what we kind of forget in our modern society is these dances lasted for hours throughout the night.
Yeah.
And it was, you usually stopped around 6 a.m. when the sun came up. And you would start probably around 9 p.m. So just dancing for all that
like
time.
Club kids.
Yeah, it's like a club kid. Plus very similar to that. We don't know how much drinking was happening or what kind of drugs are being dealt at the time. So,
very true.
It's just, those are just lifestyle things that I think we forget about as contemporary modern people.
Cocaine was popular then, right?
Sorry?
Cocaine was popular then, right?
I think cocaine and opium. So, and then you had all those wonderful diseases floating around. Speaking like COVID, cholera was really scary. I don't think she had cholera. I don't think cholera works that fast. Like if you go,
I don't think that sounds more like a stroke, or it could be like a lot of liquor before USDA or any sort of inspection was pretty dangerous. Like depending on how you distilled it, could be pretty poisonous.
Yeah, that's true. So
they for sure know there's a body in there.
And that's the other thing is they can't tell because it's a stone coffin. So the Matthews and Dr. Smelzer have been trying for about 2 years now to get permission to exhume her. And from what I could tell, reading the local news stories, it's just the local city council is just like, this isn't really a priority.
No,
she's been there for 180 years. So
it adds to the culture of your city.
It does add. It puts them on the map. They're one of the first established cities in Kentucky.
Oh,
From
wow.
they're an old city. So
Maybe
yeah,
they're just afraid that it's going to make the city look bad in some way. Who knows?
it could be that.
Or it could
One of
turn out to be really boring and they don't want to lose their myth.
Yeah, it could be that too. There's a lot of
Okay.
risks to this.
Yeah.
And then the Fox 56 article that I read pointed out that there's a good chance that a lot of people in town are related to her. So,
Oh.
yeah, there's that as well. So yeah, Fox
So, but
56.
then that would give them the history.
It could. That's my story. So,
I
Jen,
love it.
yeah, it was a good story to read. It is very much a true crime cold case with a haunt associated with it, which is my particular favorite type of haunting, which is when you have a true crime plus haunting. It's just like, yes, that's ultimate.
It's
Well,
like a
which is
Reese's peanut
exactly
butter
what.
cup.
Yeah. Peanut
Yeah,
butter.
you got the ultimate true crime plus haunting, Jen.
Yes. The Greenbrier Ghost of West Virginia. And I apologize for any mispronunciations that may occur. I'll remember my sources for the first time before I read it. Let me scroll down. Scroll. Okay. Greenbrier westvirginia.com is a story by Belinda Anderson. And I'm not sure. I think this is a news channel, WBOY. W Boy. I don't know how that's pronounced. Channel 12, maybe. A story of
Boy.
W Boy. This, you could have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, you are listening to W Boy News.
Yeah. A story, The Greenbrier Ghost by Joey Rather, and the West Virginia Archives and History. Check this source out because it has actual newspaper articles from the time of the trial, which is cool. And then Wikipedia. Of course, always Wikipedia. Alrighty. Let's talk about the Greenbrier Ghost. Elva Zona Heister is her maiden name. One day in October 1897, she met a man named Erasmus Stribling Trout Shoe. That is a long name. So Erasmus and Elva, she went by Zona, apparently. They married soon after their meeting, and 3 months into their marriage, Zona was found dead in her new home. On the morning Mrs. Shoe was found, her husband, Erasmus, a blacksmith, stopped by a neighbor's house and asked the boy living there to hunt for eggs at Shoe's house. Then to knock on the door and ask Mrs. Shoe if she needed anything from the store. The boy did as he was asked, but when he couldn't find any eggs, he knocked on the door. No one answered, and the boy went into the home. He found Zona dead on the floor. Her body, according to the Monroe Watchman, was lying stretched out perfectly straight with feet together, one hand lying by the side, and the other lying across the body. The head was slightly inclined to one side. The boy ran home and told his mother that Mrs. Shoe was dead before going to the blacksmith shop, where he informed Mr. Shoe his wife was dead. Shoe arrived home and called for the doctor. When Dr. Knapp arrived, she had been dressed and laid out. She was dressed in a dress with a high, stiff collar, and when Dr. Knapp went to undo the collar to examine her neck, which had faint discolorations on the right side, Mr. Shoe stopped him from further examination of the body, at which time Dr. Knapp pronounced her dead and Zona's body was taken away and buried. After Zona's death, her mother, Mary Heister, claimed to have seen her daughter's ghost. During these visits, Zona told her mother that her husband had murdered her because he was, quote, mad that she didn't have no meat cooked for supper and that her neck was squeezed off at the first joint. Mary took her information to the authorities, who asked Dr. Knapp his conclusions of cause of death. When Dr. Knapp informed them of Shoe's refusal for a full examination of the body, and an exhumation was ordered. An autopsy found Zona's neck had been broken and her windpipe crushed, which today we all know are telltale signs of strangulation. During the trial, the defense tried to get Mary to admit that the visits from her daughter were dreams due to distress of losing her daughter. Mary stuck to her guns. She was awake and not dreaming. Zona visited her and told her about her death. And let me tell you, this woman, no matter how hard they tried, she would not. She's like, my daughter was there. I saw her. I spoke to her, and you're not going to tell me otherwise. It's unclear of Mr. Shu's motives. He had been married twice before. His first wife divorced him after abandoning her and their child. She also cited great cruelty as a reason for divorce. His second wife died under suspicious circumstances. I thought I read somewhere that she was hit in the head by a brick, but I couldn't find that again. But I thought I'd mention it because I'm like, oh, yeah, oops, honey, just stand over here a little bit to the left and I'll just drop this brick on you. Zona was his third marriage. He apparently had a goal in life to marry 7 times. Why? I don't know.
That's a weird goal.
Isn't it? Yeah, I don't understand. Insurance money, maybe, but there's nothing that said that there was an insurance policy or anything that he was collecting money, or who knows?
Well, there's dowries. I don't know if those were
true. Yeah.
too popular by the 1890s, but
the jury convicted Shu of murder. After an hour of deliberation, it was sentenced to life in prison. He died from an unknown illness in 1900, just 3 years into his prison term. At West Virginia State Penitentiary, and is buried in a local cemetery in an unmarked grave. Zona is buried in Soleil Chapel Methodist Cemetery. To this day, this is known as the only case in which a testimony of a ghost helped convict a murderer.
Yep. It's pretty important for that.
Yeah.
So
that source I mentioned earlier that had the newspaper, read it because it has the mother's testimony, question and answer style, and it's an interesting read.
Yeah, I bet.
And this was also on an episode of Drunk History.
Yes.
So
it's a pretty famous case.
Watch it.
Yeah, it's, I think Legal Eagle also covered it on YouTube.
Okay.
But as a Halloween episode. But I believe, and I am not a lawyer, so just remember this, but it does set precedent in the US court system that ghosts are real.
Yeah.
Because there's testimony about one. So the next time somebody goes, well, ghosts aren't real, you can cite the 1897 Greenbrier Ghost case.
Yeah. Oh, she was like,
in fact, they are.
The lawyer kept trying to say, these were just dreams, weren't they? I'm going to get you to say that they were dreams. She's like, unless I don't have dreams when I'm awake. You know, it just, she was so matter of fact about it. And I just love her for that, because you're not going to tell me otherwise. And I know what happened to my kid.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, it makes me mad. They were married within 3 months. Not even, they had just met.
Yep.
I mean, I know times were different then, but they had known each other for 3 months before she died.
Yeah, and it's just amazing how the entire thing, even if you know true crime, the fact that the body was laid out, it was staged for it to be discovered. He went and told the neighbor kid, hey, go get some eggs. There were no eggs there. He knew this kid was going to go find her body.
Yeah, because if someone else finds her, then I didn't do it.
Yeah, it was trying to make some plausible deniability, and it failed tremendously. And
he never admitted to doing it. His apparently his family he didn't kill her, and
yeah,
okay, he did. She didn't just miraculously, strangle herself to death.
No, not being found perfectly laid out, like stiff as a board with an arm out, hand on her chest.
Right.
And then by the time the doctor got there to look at her, she was in a completely different outfit.
Yeah, well, and I read another story, and I didn't know how plausible it was that she was actually carried upstairs to a bed. And that's where the doctor
oh man.
But then he didn't. I mean, I guess back then husbands were supposed to have autonomy over, the woman's their property. So if the husband
Mhm.
says, "Don't touch my dead wife," you're not touching my dead wife.
Generally.
So I guess that was probably the thinking of the doctor. I'm totally speculating on that, but what also astounds me is that when the mom said, "My daughter told me what happened after she died. You need to go find out," and the prosecuting attorney went to the doctor, and they're like, "Oh, you didn't do a full examination? Well, why the hell not? Yes, take her out. You need to
Yeah.
look at her."
Jeez.
Well, it is the
You know?
1890s when the spiritualist movement was very strong.
That's true. That
So,
is very true.
it depends. And also, I don't know what the relationship was with the prosecutor. Was he local? Was he like somebody that her mother knew if he would trust her
Yeah,
testimony
they
over
didn't
anything
say.
else?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we
He
don't
was
know.
local, though. Yeah.
Hmm?
He was local,
So then
I
he
think.
probably knew her. And like, I know there's a lot of negative stuff with small towns, how they
Mhm,
can be very damaging.
mhm.
This is one of those cases where in the small town, it's kind of good because people trusted each other enough to go, okay, Mrs. Hester is having this. This is happening to her. We know of her to be sound mind all the other rest of her life.
Yeah.
And now she's suddenly going on about this.
Yeah.
So we're going to actually bother to look into it. It's a lot of trust in a
Mhm.
time where I know, at least for me, it's hard to trust other people, which is
Yeah.
what makes the story also extremely interesting.
Well, and that's what's frustrating about crime today is that, especially in small towns, they totally forget that they know the person or know who the person was prior to what they're accused of or prior to the event, even the victim prior to, and then they change everything that they thought they knew about this person and make up a totally new person. Do you know what
Mm.
I'm saying? That kind of fits the crime or whatever. I don't know. I just
Oh, they make the facts fit the crime instead of looking at the
well,
crime and
yeah,
actually analyzing it better.
right.
They
And like
cherry pick what they want,
right.
which is
And
a human thing, but
yeah, or like they know this person never would have kidnapped a child. But then all of
yeah,
a sudden they're accused of it and they're like, "Oh, of course they did it."
yeah.
I mean, that's a stupid example, but um also, just the realization that any trial or
Mhm,
they say for the truth, but it's never the truth. It's about who can convince you
mhm.
of what they say the facts are. And
Yeah.
it's never about the truth or the facts unless
There's a
there's
lot
DNA
that
involved.
goes Yeah, there's a lot that goes unsaid too during social groupings.
Yeah.
I think it's called social loafing, or that's the act. So you see this a lot with kids that drown in pools
Oh,
where and they're surrounded by people and
and no one
the
helps
kid
them.
drowns and then nobody takes any type of responsibility for it
Mhm.
because everyone doesn't feel like it was their job to take care of the kid type of
Yeah.
thing. I
Yeah.
think that phenomena is called social loafing when there's a large group, no one wants to take any responsibility for the thing. Um, I
I
think we're getting off base a little
Yeah, a
bit.
little bit.
Yeah. So
No.
we'll redirect back to Christina, who has a hometown haunt.
Woohoo!
Yay.
And I don't know if this is true crime, but uh, we can get into that. This is from Mary Jo, and she says, "I had an experience at the Frank Lloyd Wright studio tour in Oak Park, Illinois. I was standing on the outer edge of the tour group. I was in the very first room and I felt a shove from behind. It was shocking. That place has the worst aura, very depressing, and his history is not impressive as a person. He was a known womanizer and mistreated his wife and kids. No surprise it's haunted." And that's true. I've not been to Taliesin the Oak Park residence I've been to. I didn't feel anything there, but I'm curious what Taliesin in Wisconsin is like because that's where Frank Lloyd Wright's mistress was murdered
Mm.
by an axe and her children by their butler,
Oh,
who
yeah.
immediately swallowed poison, and so they never found out why he did it.
Sounds like he might have
Um,
been paid to do it.
Wow, what? I had not heard that.
It's one of
Mhm.
those things about Frank Lloyd Wright. You see all the cute little prints like in catalogs and visit the Frank Lloyd Wright houses, and then you go and read a little bit more about Frank Lloyd Wright, and it turns out there was an axe murderer in his life.
Mhm. Mhm.
He had like, I forget how many children with his first wife at Oak Park. I want to say 6 or 7. I don't know. It was a lot, and he left his wife and children for one of his clients' wives, and she was living in Taliesin, Wisconsin, and her kids were living there too, and they still don't know why the butler murdered them. He was not
Mm.
there at the time. I forget if he was maybe inspecting property. I can't remember the details of that, but it's one of those things when you read the biography of Frank Lloyd Wright that's unexpected.
I do believe we should make that a future episode.
Holy moly. Well, thank you for sharing that
Yeah.
story. Oh,
I
wow.
hate to think who shoved you. That's
I-
mean. Don't
Well,
shove people.
yeah, you don't shove
Ghost.
people.
Maybe it was the wife. I don't know if she would still be around there.
I
I
mean,
Another woman cannot be in this house.
wow.
it didn't
That's
appear
the sound of me going, I don't know.
typical of somebody that was sort of a personality like Frank Lloyd Wright. He did just move to Arizona with another, like he always had these women, he was lived with somebody else in Arizona
Wow.
and just moved on, I guess.
Why
Talk about slanderers.
Why is that? Picasso was like that. He was a huge womanizer. And
um
why is it? Why?
I
Just
think it's
because
the
you're
cult of
genius doesn't
personality with,
mean
well, it
you
doesn't
gotta
mean,
be that
I
way.
mean, I don't know if I consider either of these men a genius. I mean, they certainly were good at marketing themselves,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
their work is popular, but this mythos that raises around these men, and
Yeah.
one thing that people aren't giving credit is the support that Frank Lloyd Wright's first wife probably gave him. Like a lot of
Mhm.
times these people have
Mhm.
extreme support
Mhm.
by like a lot of famous authors, their wives read their and helped correct their scripts and
Mhm.
writings and stuff, and were very important editors of their work, and were pretty much erased from the work. And
Oh, in
these guys got
restaurant.
all the credit. Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm familiar.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so this person ends up benefiting from the
Uh-huh.
work of a lot of people. I mean, and you see that with a lot of sort of these genius, a lot of times they have a lot of help.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
isn't
just
there
because they
like
have the talent doesn't give you the right to treat people that way.
yeah.
Mhm.
Wasn't there like famous composers that took their female students' works and passed it off as their own at one point?
I
Can't
have
remember
heard some
what
of
it
those
was.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
it
doesn't
was
surprise
somebody,
me.
but unfortunately, I'm not a classic music person, so I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just that tends to be a recurring theme. People stealing other people's stuff.
Mhm. Well,
The
Then
auteur.
female
it's in every
creators.
industry.
Yeah.
True.
Way to go, Mary Shelley. You kept your copyright on Frankenstein, so
I know, and it's great to see someone get credit for her work. And
yes.
but what is it they said, the movie, that one of the early movies, it was like they didn't have her name in the credits. It was like Mrs. whatever her husband's name was listed
No.
as the author.
Mm, I just don't
And
know. But
yes, I
Right.
will have that looked up for the next episode. But
yeah.
apparently, one of the early Hollywood versions of Frankenstein listed Mary Shelley as Mrs. I forget what her husband's name was, but
Yeah.
all
Wow.
right.
I didn't know that. This has been Cat's Learning Corner during the hometown art section. I have no idea that Oak Park, the Frank Lloyd Wright studio had such a history. And
Yeah, well, the murders didn't happen at Oak Park. They happened at Taliesin in Wisconsin.
oh, okay.
I mean,
Still didn't know those happened.
he started seeing his mistress then. Like,
Mhm.
apparently it was quite a scandal. Like, it was one of those things where it was in all the scandal sheets in the newspaper because he was like driving around with this lady and stuff, and his wife refused to divorce him, and it was messy.
Wow. Wow. That
So
reminds me,
Yeah.
I need to cover the Snook Hicks murders in Columbus,
Oh.
Ohio,
Snook
which
Hicks.
is another haunted true crime story. So
Okay,
Oh,
I
and
will
what
look
about
it up then.
put the book on.
what was the woman that was at our event who lived down the street from the house where all those murders were?
Yeah, the Rupert Murder House, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
is an extremely tragic true crime story that, and it's been written about a lot, and there's a lot of haunts. And you've never heard of the Rupert House killing at all?
Mm-mm.
Oh no, it is a very sad story, and it deals with a family annihilator type murder,
Yeah.
and and yeah, it's a very sad story. No one's been able to investigate the house because it's privately owned,
Yeah.
and the owners have never let anyone go in to ghost hunt. I
Yeah.
did know some ghost hunters who had gone in once on a tour when it was for rent.
Hmm.
So they didn't go in for an investigation, they just went in, but they couldn't take any of their equipment, they just got to look around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kinda like the Villisca Axe Murder House, where it is a wholly, um, very Midwest type house. It doesn't look like anything that would have
Yeah.
anything out of place, but then once you know the history of it and who's died there, then it gets very, mm, just depressing. It's a
Yeah.
sad place, it's very melancholy. So we
Mhm.
I don't know, we can, if our listeners are interested, we can talk about the, Rupert murders.
Yes. We
True
can
crime,
talk.
we don't tend to talk about too often because we get
Mm.
teary, because things are
Mhm.
sad.
Well, and it can be very
It's about real people sometimes that have family
graphic.
members too.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
can, that one's a very graphic murder, and there's
Mhm.
children involved, so
Yeah.
it's not one that I'm too hot on covering just because, 1, there's a lot of coverage on it already, and, we don't have it's not too ghost story-ish, there aren't any real like,
Yeah.
the most stories of it are people will see the children staring out the windows if you walk
Oh.
past the house.
Oh.
So, yeah, and shadow people. So,
Oh.
and there, I've revealed it, that's what the people have seen. So getting interviews of people who have lived there is tricky.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, they
So,
probably, one, remember it, two, may know someone
yeah. Yeah,
related
they
to
were
it, or
prominent, but the Rupert family was not prominent, but they were well known in their community, and it
Mhm.
shocked everyone in the tri-state area when it happened. And it happened on over Easter dinner. So,
Wow.
now I'm just talking about the actual
awful.
case. So, yeah, I'll just stop it there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, on
But
that
on
note,
that
Yeah, I'm
on
gonna
that
I'm
note,
I'm gonna look that up.
we all
yeah,
have
It's
lots of
my
research.
morbid fascination.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's a morbid curious moment, definitely.
Yeah.
Um, but on that note, you can always send us your stories to hometownhauntedmail@gmail.com, or you can join our Facebook group, Hometown Haunts, and share your stories there as well. And I have seen that we've gotten a lot of people asking to be a part of the Hometown Haunts Facebook group, and
Welcome.
we see them. Welcome.
Yay!
Thank you. We're glad
Ew.
you're here. Please share your paranormal stories, and just like Mary Jo did, your stories about places you go and the odd entities you run into. You can also follow us at Cincy Cabinet of Curiosities on Instagram, and that just helps stay up to date with everything that we've been doing. And also, thank you, Jen, for putting the podcast onto Apple Podcast and Spotify, and also YouTube. And you can just find us by searching Hometown Haunts Podcast. Please take a moment to rate us and review on all those different platforms so that the algorithm can recommend it to other people who are into spooky and morbid history, just like you are. And of course, we have the links to all of our sources, not all the sources, but links that are in the show notes. So, with that, I think it's time to say good night. So, good night, everyone. Stay
Bye.
spooky.
Bye.